So I'd like to ask you how our food choices and maybe lifestyle choices affect these 5 statements. Number 1, humanity has wiped out 60% of mammals, birds, fish, and reptiles since 1970, leading the world's foremost experts to warn that the annihilation of wildlife is now an emergency that threatens civilization. Point number 2, the world's insects are hurtling down the path to extinction, threatening a catastrophic collapse of nature's ecosystems, according to the first global scientific review. Number 3, more than 40% of insect species are declining and a third are endangered, the analysis found. Number 4, a UN report says species extinction rates are accelerating and goes on to say nature is declining globally at rates unprecedented in human history, with grave impacts on the people around the world likely. Number 5, extinction of wildlife. There are half as many African lions than there were 25 years ago. The iconic species has disappeared from 94% of its historic range. So those 5 things, how does our diet and lifestyle have an impact on any of these things?
All right, well, it's pretty obvious. This kind of goes along with what we've been saying. I was in Africa recently, about I guess, 2 years ago, and you can really see it happening in Africa. There's just hard push to rapidly increase the presence of Kentucky Fried Chicken and Burger King and McDonald's and these other fast food operations, and as well as Monsanto is pushing hard to get in there. And so what this is leading to essentially is a radical and massive change on the African continent, where elephants, and all the animals, giraffes and zebras and hippopotamus and virtually all these animals were allowed to live. Nobody was really, hunters were sometimes hunting them, but now we see that they are considered pests. Their status has really changed. The local farmers are now just killing them. They hate them. They hate the elephants. They hate the lions. They try to destroy them. They're just out to kill them all off. They want to kill them all off because they're interfering with their fields of genetically engineered corn and soy and alfalfa and so forth that they need to feed to their cows and pigs and chickens. So we have to understand that that animal agriculture is a war against wildlife. We could see it so clearly when we were there, and it has to somehow. I think perhaps maybe as Americans, the interesting thing is that still wherever we go, all over the world, Asia, Africa, Europe, even most places, the United States is still held up as the culture that everyone wants to copy. They want to, our music they like, our movies they like, our food, they want to eat the same food. So really, as people living in the United States, every one of us who moves to a plant-based way of eating, when we go vegan, we have a massive impact on the whole planet, really. People still look to the United States for leadership, and it's the American fast food empire as it moves out into the rest of the planet that's really wreaking havoc and causing this massive extinction of species that we're hearing about. So I think as people living in the United States, we have an obligation to try to change that in some way, to try to be an example of kindness and caring and respect for life and environmental responsibility by, as a country, really questioning this. And it's very urgent. It's so critical. There's some estimates that say just within the next 10 years, virtually all of wildlife will be gone. And if it gets to that, we're going to be next. I think you can't keep sowing the seeds of extinction without reaping that ourselves. And the irony is that we're so clueless. Most people don't understand. We'll go extinct, and we won't even know why it happened. That's really, in a sense, the great tragedy if we do continue on this path. But as Ocean was saying, I think it's important to realize that there's a beautiful positive future that's also beckoning. And we can question this model of animal agriculture that's destroying not only our physical health, but the health of wildlife, and move toward a positive future. and to do it here in this country. For example, I think we should really be aware, I think I mentioned it during my talk, but the USDA, Department of Wildlife Services, is killing millions of animals, hundreds of millions of animals with our taxpayer dollars at the request of ranchers and farmers every year. Coyotes and bobcats and bears and a lot of birds, millions of birds are killed because they're seen to interfere with livestock and with grains that are needed for livestock and so forth. So it's happening in this country. It's happening all over the world. It's always been happening. Animal agriculture has always been a war against wildlife, and this is what you're talking about in this whole thing. The thing, I'll just say this one last final thing, that 10,000 years ago, for the very first time, as I talk about in the World Peace Diet, we started animal agriculture. There was no animal agriculture, as far as we can tell, until 10,000 years ago in what is today Iraq. People for the first time started to own wild sheep and goats and then cows as property for food. That's called herding. And so 10,000 years ago, human beings were 1% of the biomass on planet Earth and on land, and free-living animals were 99% of the biomass and of the weight. Basically,
the animal weight, right?
Animal weight, yeah. So they were 99% of the weight, and human beings, we were 1% of the weight. Today, just 10,000 years later, which is just a few seconds, really, in geological time, we are now, human beings and our livestock, and the animals we own as property, are now 98% of the biomass. And wild animals are 2%. We've basically taken the whole earth away from them. We've stolen it from them, and we've used it to basically take, their habitat is gone, and we're using it for cows and pigs and sheep and other animals. And the oceans, it's even worse. So this is the situation, and if we don't turn it around, it's very obvious that we're not really deserving to live here. I mean, we're not deserving to live on a planet if we're going to destroy the life here. I mean, if the Creator created this beautiful planet, and all we do is just destroy it, well, why are we here? That's not our purpose. We've lost our purpose because we've stolen the purposes of animals. So we have to give them back their purpose for us to have our purpose. We have to liberate animals for us to be liberated.
I'll add to that. You mentioned Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's in Africa. I worked in Africa quite a bit studying infectious diseases, and the new trend in my field is now to go to Africa not to study HIV or tuberculosis, but to study heart disease and diabetes and high blood pressure for this reason, that the infiltration of these fast food places has been very detrimental, and we're recreating a number of the studies that we've done in the United States. There's a very large one called the Framingham Heart Study, which established the risk factors we have for heart disease. And now what we're doing is redoing that Framingham study in countries all over the world, in Haiti and sub-Saharan Africa, because of this change that we have been the leaders in changing the culture. And I think what we're hearing is that we can be the leaders in reversing that and to go into a more positive direction.
Yeah, well said. So we're seeing this collapse of insects and pollinators. And what a lot of people don't really think about too much is that we're spraying our fields with pesticides that kill bugs. And then we scratch our heads and wonder why insects are dying in droves when these pesticides are rampant, not just in our fields, but in our water, in our ecosystems. And we're also killing microorganisms. As much as we in our livestock weigh, we're still massively outweighed by bacteria. But we're killing this bacteria and the bacteriological diversity of the earth, both by ravaging natural ecosystems and also by poisoning those that we manage with all these pesticides and monocrops. And so the result is that the bacteriological diversity of this world is plummeting, and this directly impacts our own microbiome. There's no good conclusive way to measure it, but it's pretty clear that the average human has a fraction of the diversity of bacteria in our digestive tracts that humans did generations back. And partly that's obviously from antibiotics, which kill a whole lot of little critters. But it's also because we're not exposed to dirt, we're not playing with healthy dirt, we're not touching soil, we're not touching diverse ecosystems, we're living in cubicles, we're living in houses surrounded by plastic. And we're eating food that has been fundamentally sterilized and is somewhat dead. And so one of my friends, Dr. Zach Bush, triple board certified MD, he takes his patients and he actually prescribes to them to go sit in a swamp, to go immerse their bodies in a mountain stream. He's found like healthy, beautiful ecosystems near him, and he tells his patients to go spend time there so they can replenish their microbiome, so they can connect with that living, healthy soil. And the beautiful thing is that it doesn't take long for these organisms to replenish. They're really good at spreading. So it's interesting when we think about superbugs and antibiotic-resistant bacteria and all the critters we're scared of, but then you're also coming back, Matt, to the fact that a healthy immune system is the best defense, right? Not killing all the bad guys, but being able to have a healthy body that responds well. And one of the keys to that is that diversity in the microbiome. It's like the biggest frontier, I think, of medical science is understanding what's going on in our own bodies. And by the way, the microbiome isn't just in your gut. It's also on your skin. It's everywhere that you interact with the world around you. Technically, your intestines are actually the outside of your body because your body hasn't yet taken them in. I mean, you've swallowed it, but it hasn't actually gotten through into your bloodstream. And so the microbiome is that precious interface, sometimes only one cell thick, between what is us and what's not us. And having healthy and diverse bacteria living there turns out to be essential to our well-being and survival. So when we talk about the insects and the pollinators and the role they play, I can't help but think that they're deeply connected to the health of the soils and ultimately to the health of our own bodies.
It's a great message. It's a great message, Ocean. What you're basically saying is we should embrace the world around us and that we shouldn't be hiding away in cubicles, as you said. And one of the things that I wrestle with as a parent is, and I talked about this afternoon, is how much to expose my children to. I grew up in Alabama playing in dirty sandboxes, and I think that was probably good for me. And there was an article that went viral earlier this year by a journalist that said, you should let your son pick his nose. And I was sitting with my wife not long ago, and we looked over, and my son picked his nose and ate it. And my wife, who's a kidney transplant doctor, turned to me and goes, maybe it's good for him. And so I don't know, but it's an active area that we're studying is what should we expose people to? You know, we don't want to siphon people away and make everyone a bubble boy, but we also don't want to put you in harm's way. And one way to figure that out is actually through the microbiome research that Ocean just alluded to. So the collection of the trillions of bacteria that are on us, that are on each and every one of us. We're using artificial intelligence and we're using deep sequencing to figure out what collection of bacteria are associated with certain diseases, like diabetes and Alzheimer's, but also what collection of bacteria are associated with health benefits. People who live longer, people who are more healthy, who have intact immune systems. Is there some collection of bacteria that is essential to living a healthy life? And I can tell you there are a lot of resources being poured into that right now to try to sort that question out.
Yeah, and I think, thank you, that's so, I think, you know, just in the last, as you're saying, maybe last 10 years, we've seen this explosion of interest in the microbiome. I think it reflects, and also the interest that's coming back, again, more into the public awareness of healthy soil and the importance of building a healthy soil as a healthy foundation for growing food, and then realizing that we have trillions of cells in our bodies or on our bodies, essentially, that our health depends on them. And I think it's fascinating to see that people had much more fiber in the past than we're eating today, and a lot more polypeptides, basically plant-based foods, that what really seems to make a most healthy community inside of us are the plant-based foods that are organic, because, you know, glyphosate, for example, is a broad-spectrum antibiotic, and so if we're eating, even if we're eating a plant-based diet, if it's not organic, we're eating these chemicals that are killing the microbiome. They're really just killing the healthy bacteria inside of us. If we're eating animal-based foods, we're eating a lot of glyphosate most of the glyphosate is eaten by animals. So it's really important, I think, to, again, see the importance of the quality of the food we're eating, not just for our bodies, but for the community that lives inside of our bodies, that our health depends on, this community that we call the microbiome, which is responsible for our digestion. And also, the research is very interesting, I think, connecting the microbiome with hormones that bring us inner peace and happiness, and the vagus nerve, which is connected, from the microbiome, or from this area down here up to our brain, which again is seen to be responsible in many ways for our moods. Again, to realize that there's this epidemic of frustration and depression and social anxiety and all these things. And the animals that we're eating, they're experiencing depression and anxiety and frustration. And what kind of a biome, what is this community down here if we're feeding them these foods that are full of toxic chemicals and misery and so forth? We're creating a community even inside of us that's experienced perhaps the same kind of a thing. That it's pretty clear, again, from all the wisdom traditions of all time have talked about this basic idea of the interconnectedness, that if we treat others with kindness and respect, the bacteria in the soil, the fruits, the trees, the plants, and our own inner community, it's all interconnected. And we have a science that's very reductionistic and keeps taking things apart. And I think the feminine wisdom is to put things together and see the bigger patterns here. It's really pretty obvious. And to question anything that takes away from our basic feminine wisdom of caring about this beautiful planet and that's outside of us and within us, and looking beyond the material level to the consciousness, the awareness, the energy of our being, and seeing how, that's really the key thing. And the materialism of our animal agriculture society in many ways suppresses that from the time we're little kids. We're taught that we live in a universe that's essentially meaningless, that life just came about through sort of this random mutation of who knows what. There was a big bang for some reason, it doesn't matter, and our lives don't matter, and nothing matters except just, basically that gives all the power to the corporations. That means if we don't have a meaning and a purpose, because this is the basic foundation of our society. It's the most toxic story you can imagine. But this is what we're teaching our children. This is what pervades our educational system, is the story of animal agriculture, of just no purpose. We don't have a purpose because we steal the purposes of animals. And it creates this foundation where our only meaning comes from consuming. The more we can consume, the more status we have, the more our life shows we had meaning. So the more we can come to this planet and destroy everything before we leave and teach our kids to do the same thing, then that means we're successful. That's basically the message of animal agriculture, of the herding culture that's based on dominating and exploiting and oppressing other beings. So it's now had 10,000 years to mature and create what we see today. And now what we're seeing, I think, is a transformation. It's beginning to happen, the resurrection of the feminine dimension of intuition and wisdom that makes the connections and questions this and creates another type of science and another type of religion, another type of education that's based on interconnectedness and respect for the basic truth that what we are is eternal consciousness. We're not just an object that was born and will die. We're not just a piece of meat that's here to struggle and compete against other pieces of meat. That what we are is awareness functioning through a physical body for a few years, but we're here to learn and grow and to help make an increase in awareness here. And I think this is the wisdom that shines in all of us, and it's really important for us to take time every day to be quiet and listen. The real wisdom does not come from the outside through outside scientific researchers. I mean, forget it. It comes from inside us. And if we want to get dirty and connect with the earth, we'll know how to do it. And we'll connect with the earth, and we'll connect with nature, and we'll get much stronger and brighter, and we'll teach our children to do that, because that's our wisdom. We have to take back our power. It's always within us. It's not outside of us and experts. It's in us.